Shalom, this is Meir Kahane, wishing you the best of Jewish New Year's, a year of health and prosperity and personal happiness, and a year of peace and pride and victory for the Jewish people. I take this unique opportunity to speak to you and tell you about our tremendous victory in the Knesset, a victory I can only describe as a miracle of God. For 472 days, the left had badgered and nagged and demanded and pushed and shouted for their bill against what they called racism. In fact, that very day, members of Kahane, the umbrella group against racism, had stood vigil outside the Knesset with a huge banner reading, "How much longer? It is now 472 days since the law against racism was introduced." And now, 8 minutes after midnight on Wednesday, August the 5th, the left and the news media and all those haters of Meir Kahane who had demanded it finally had their bill. The Knesset of Israel passed the law against incitement to racism. And the result was pandemonium and shock and anger, fury on the part of the left. On the Knesset floor, angry leftist Knesset members condemned the bill, and every single one voted against it. And on the same floor, the man against whom the entire thing was originally aimed, myself, smiled broadly and voted for it with both hands. A leftist shaken with anger walked out shouting, "He has won, look at him laughing at us." And a veteran reporter shook his head and said, "For the first time, I'm afraid. Maybe someone there really is looking after him." The incredible story of the law against racism had come to an end so unexpected that the following day the news media was still in a state of shock. Chadashot, a cheap yellow rag put out by Haaretz and a hater of Meir Kahane, headlined the story, "The law against racism, Kahane also voted for it." And in the body of the story, it said, Meir Kahane voted for the law, and that in essence may be the entire story. The Jerusalem Post editorial, which is enclosed, read, "Kahane has last laugh." And what happened? It all began with my election to the Knesset in 1984. Following 3 previous defeats, no one imagined that I could possibly win, and thus the stunning victory shocked the left. But when the full extent of my popularity began to be evident, as it became clear that tens of thousands would have voted for me, but did not because they were afraid that their votes would be wasted, and now in the future election, they too would come over to Kach. The Likud and Tchia on the right also became worried, and rather cynically, they joined the campaign against racism. And so the government decided to draft a law against racism which had 2 parts. The first banned any Knesset party that was racist, and that passed quickly enough, but it did not define racism. That was left to a second law, the one which is called the law against incitement to racism. Everyone was sure that that second one would fill in the missing definition and it would pass quickly. And quite frankly, gloom was widespread among our supporters. But we kept up our nightly rallies all over the country. In fact, the day after the election in 1984, when everyone rested, we immediately called rallies, and no other party has done what we do. Every single night, 1 or 2 rallies. I shake hundreds of hands every single night. Faith is the name of the game, and faith is the only reason that I can think of, and the only explanation that I have for what happened. On at least 4 separate occasions during those 472 days of labor, it was definite that the bill would come up on that day for final passage. The darkest moment, what appeared to be the death knell, was on the day of the Kach convention in Jerusalem. a convention that led the leftists to an hysterical outburst of fury and demand that the bill be placed on the floor for a vote that day. And everyone, Shimon Peres, the chairman of the law committee, Eli Kulas, agreed that it would come up for a vote on that day in a terrible form. Nevertheless, suddenly, Kulas fell ill. More, he suddenly adamantly refused to allow anyone else except himself to present the bill. On 3 other occasions, fortune unexpectedly stopped the bill from coming up for a vote, with even the most cynical atheist suddenly seeing something most unnatural about the entire thing. And perhaps the greatest miracle was the sudden outburst of courage on the part of the religious parties who awoke from the dead and insisted that the bill be held up because it threatened to have religious practices and statements called racist. Now, the bill as originally drawn up, and as it stood for 472 days of the perils of Kahane, read as follows. Definition: racism. Persecution, humiliation, embarrassment, or hatred against a group, or causing tensions between sections of the population, and acts of hostility and violence, all because of their belonging to a race, or nationality, or religion. And so we walked a tightrope for almost 1.5 years. We never compromised. We kept thumbing our nose at the government. We refused to change our platform or speeches, all the while awaiting for what appeared to be the inevitable axe to fall. Yet it never did, and the left and the news media they controlled became increasingly frustrated and hysterical in their demands that the bill be brought up for a vote. Now, as the days passed and there was no bill, our supporters were jubilant. But while I never let my feelings be known, I understood a danger that others did not. Even if there would be no bill against racism, they had already passed that first bill banning racist parties from running. And if this second bill defining racism would not pass, the High Court would take it on itself to define racism. And they were certainly bitterly hostile to Kach. They would certainly define racism in a manner that would describe Kach as just that. I knew that only a miracle in the form of a bill that changed the definition of racism and that defined it in a manner beneficial to us could save Kach. The chances of that happening naturally were poor, to say the least. And so the miracle happened, unnaturally. Knesset Speaker Shlomo Hillel saved us. Hillel is one of my most bitter enemies. He was obsessed with the need for a bill against racism in Kahane. And so he demanded that the bill come up for a vote on the final week of the Knesset summer session. And he put it on the agenda. The government was now faced with this demand, and on the other hand, the threat by the religious parties to cause a crisis if the bill passed as it read. And so the miracle began to unfold. First of all, the word religion was removed from the definition as grounds for racism. Secondly, Likud Knesset member Miki Eitan, a man who had once compared my bill against intermarriage with the Nuremberg laws, of all people, presented an amendment to the bill that added the following words: statements made with the intent of preserving the character, exclusiveness, and ritual of the religion shall not be considered a crime, as long as not made with the intent of inciting to racism. This amendment was made part of the bill that would go to the Knesset. In plain Hebrew, it took out of the realm of racism anything said or written which was based on religion, a thing that described everything that Kach said and did. The miracle had taken place. And if you would have seen the faces of the left, you would have understood the miracle. What this means, of course, is that, thank God, we will be on the ballot because this definition binds everyone, including the court. We can say what we say, and we will continue to say what we say, because it is based not only on sheer logic, but on Judaism. And now I want to say something else to you. You know, as the terrible Holocaust inexorably ground on, the Jews of the gas chambers beseeched the Jews of silence in the free world to save them. And among the Jews, behind Hitler's Nazi curtain, was the saintly and legendary Rabbi Ber Weissmandel. In a letter that will forever remain an indictment of murder against the Jews of the free world, Rabbi Weissmandel pleaded for, and I quote, a loud and piercing outcry, unquote, for the bombing of the death camps and of the roads and bridges leading to them. And he concluded his letter with the following words that should sear the soul and shame the Jew until this very day. And this is what he wrote. Drop all other business to get this done. Remember that one day of your idleness kills 12,000 souls. You, our brothers, children of Israel, are you insane? Do you not know the hell around us? For whom are you saving your money? End quote. For whom are you saving your money? The words are frightening in their staggering directness and simplicity. All that money banked away and stored away and screwed away and, worst of all, spent away on nonsense and frivolity and obscene luxury and self-indulgence. All the money that might have been spent to publicize daily the awesome tragedy, to create daily the demonstrations and protests and actions that might have saved hundreds of thousands of Jewish lives. All that money, and for whom were we saving it? And why for ourselves, to indulge our bodies and souls, to live a better life, when by so doing we were destroying ourselves as Jews. What did King Solomon say in Proverbs? He rushes after wealth, does the greedy man, and does not understand that want shall come upon him. We saved our money or spent it on frivolous vanities, and our brothers and sisters died. And who can ever forgive us, and who can ever rid our ears of the question that dins ceaselessly? For whom are you saving your money? I sit here in Israel today, in 1986, and see the awesome tragedy that covers us as some black cloud of catastrophe. I see it coming. And I know it need not be. And I know that Jews can be saved, and the state can be redeemed, and the Jewish people can be spared the agony of, God forbid, another tragedy. If only the Jew will be prepared this time. While there is yet time, very little time, but there is still time to give. And what will you say in the time of agony, God forbid, when you know how much could have been done and how different it might have been had you opened your heart, your hands, had you given of yourself? I tell you that the state of Israel stands on the threshold of tragedy, and the voice of truth and the hand of salvation is there. It needs only the power that you can give it to be heard and to be felt. I see the Arabs growing as a cancer in our midst. I see them growing in population. They're moving to become a majority. How many Arabs will there be in Israel in 10 years? How many will be in the Knesset? They're citizens. It's a democratic state. How many will be in the Knesset to form a coalition government with the extreme left? I see them taking jobs. I see them ruining our women. I see the beginning of a Palestine on the ruins of Israel. I see them shooting and bombing and murdering Jews from ambush every single day. I see the sadness of a generation of young Israelis, sabras, lost, without Jewish identity, ravaged by guilt and self-hate, marching for our enemies, marching against Israel, the victims of an education, a lack of education, a lack of Jewish education. I see the intermarriage in Israel. I see Arabs who will take Jewish girls from Sephardic families who never knew what assimilation was in the exile and destroy them. I see the same intermarriage and assimilation eating away at the souls of millions of young Jews in the exile. And I see the terrible Jew hatred, whether from a black Farrakhan or the whites waiting to devour their bodies. There are so many things that have to be done and that can be done, and that we could do it. I see the calamity of Jewish people, but a breath away from redemption, through a return to Jewishness, the Jewish pride to God, a return that is dependent upon the awesomely difficult willingness to climb the dangerous mountain of faith. I see the awesome and agonizing choice, but it is within our hands. I see hope, because I know that we hold our fate within our own hands. We can bring Jewish redemption, glorious and immediate, if only we understood and acted upon that understanding. If only there would be Jewish leaders in Israel and in the world. If only, if. The time is so short. We are the hope. You who support Kach, you are the hope of Kach, and Kach is the hope of Israel. Our stunning victory in the Knesset in 1984 has moved us in such a short time to the most electric, exciting movement in the Jewish state. Forget the attempted ban on us by radio and television. Nightly, our rallies drew hundreds and hundreds of exciting and adoring crowds that no one else can. And the private party polls show that in the next election, Kach can get 8 and 10 and more seats. We will be the balance of power. It is this strength of Kach that leads to the hysterical attacks on it by the left. It is fear that drives them. Fear of the rise of Kahane and Kach. Fear by the false of the truth. We can be the third party in the Knesset. We will be poised to take power in the election following that, as all the 15 and 16 and 17-year-old youngsters who in the hundreds of thousands yell Kahane, Kahane, will vote. We have a chance to save Israel and the Jewish people if you will ask yourself, for whom am I saving my money? If we would have the sums needed to establish offices in every town in Israel, if we would have the money to set up clubs for young people in every city in Israel, if we could have the funds to advertise on leaflet in every place in Israel, we would gain power and we would bring the final redemption. And you're one of some 200 special contributors, special Jews who understand. You have helped us in the past. We must raise $500,000 for this election in order to save Israel, because there is such little time left. Know that. We want to save Israel. Nothing less is at stake. From you, from each of these 200 special people, we're asking to give us a minimum of $1,000. $1,000, yes. Tell me, is that really too much for me to ask of you to save Israel? Is not Jewish survival worth that to you? Is Meir Kahane, as the future Prime Minister of Israel, worth that to you? I ask you personally, do me a personal favor. Write out your check now for at least $1,000. And if you have given more in the past, give more now. Make it out to the Jewish idea. It'll be tax deductible. And mail it to Post Office Box 425, Midwood Station, Brooklyn, New York, 11230. The question, as I conclude, returns to you again. For whom are you saving your money? God forbid that if tragedy strikes, you'll weep and ask, for whom was I saving my money? Give me that $1,000 today or more, and help me become the Prime Minister, and help me to save Jews from Arabs and from themselves.